Number 9. Then spoke Paharn, a prophet of the land of Hurn. And Paharn said, There was one man that knew, but he stands not here. And the king said, Is he further than my heralds might travel in the night, if they went upon fleet horses? And the prophet answered, He is no further than thy heralds may well travel in the night, but further than they may return from in all the years. Out of this city there goes a valley wandering through all the world, and opens out at last on the green land of Hurn. On the one side is in the distance gleams the sea, on the other side a forest, black and ancient, darkens the fields of Hurn. Beyond the forest and the sea there is no more, saving the twilight, and beyond that the gods. In the mouth of the valley sleeps the village of Rustan. Here I was born, and heard the murmurs of the flocks and herds, and saw the tall smoke standing between the sky and the still roofs of Rustan, and learned that men might not go into the dark forest, and that beyond the forest and the sea was not save the twilight, and beyond that the gods. Often there came travelers from the world all down the winding valley, and spake with strange speech in Rustan, and returned again up the valley, going back to the world, sometimes with bells and camels and men running on foot. Kings came down the valley from the world, but always the travelers returned by the valley again, and none went further than the land of Hurn. And Kitneb also was born in the land of Hurn, and tended the flocks with me. But Kithneb would not care to listen to the murmur of the flocks and herds, and see the tall smoke standing between the roofs and the sky, but needed to know how far from Hurn it was that the world met the twilight, and how far across the twilight sat the gods. And often Kithneb dreamed as he tended the flocks and herds, and when others slept he would wander near to the edge of the forest, wherein men might not go. And the elders of the land of Hurn reproved Kithneb when he dreamed. Yet Kithneb was still as other men, and mingled with his fellows until the day of which I will tell thee, O king. For Kithneb was aged about 80 years, and he and I were sitting near the flocks, and he gazed long at the point where the dark forest met the sea at the end of the land of Hurn. But when night drove the twilight down under the forest, we brought the flocks together to Rustan. And I went up the street between the houses to see 4 princes that had come down the valley from the world. And they were clad in blue and scarlet, and wore plumes upon their head. And they gave us in exchange for our sheep some gleaming stones, which they told us were of great value on the word of princes. And I sold them 3 sheep, and Darnag sold them 8. But Kithneb came not with the others to the marketplace where the 4 princes stood, but went alone across the field to the edge of the forest. And it was upon the next morning that the strange thing befell Kithneb. For I saw him in the morning coming from the fields, and I hailed him with the shepherd's cry, wherewith we shepherds call to one another, and he answered not. Then I stopped and spake to him, and Kithneb said not a word till I became angry, and left him. We then spake together concerning Kithneb, and others had hailed him, and he had not answered them. But to one he had said that he had heard the voices of the gods speaking beyond the forest, and so would never listen more to the voices of men. Then we said, Kithneb is mad, and none hindered him. Another took his place among the flocks, and Kithneb sat in the evenings by the edge of the forest on the plain alone. So Kithneb spake to none for many days, but when any forced him to speak, he said that every evening he heard the gods when they came to sit in the forest from over the twilight and see, and that he would speak no more with men. But as the months went by, men in Rustan came to look on Kithneb as a prophet, and we were wont to point to him when strangers came down the valley from the world, saying, Here in the land of Hurn we have a prophet such as you have not among your cities, for he speaks at evening with the gods. A year had passed over the silence of Kithneb, when he came to me and spake, and I bowed before him, because we believed that he spake among the gods. And Kithneb said, I will speak to thee before the end, because I am most lonely. For how may I speak again with men and women in the little streets of Ristan amongst the houses, when I have heard the voices of the gods singing above the twilight? But I am more lonely than ever, Ristan wots of. For this I tell thee, when I hear the gods, I know not what they say. Well, indeed, I know the voice of each, for ever calling me away from contentment. Well I know their voices as they call to my soul and trouble it. I know by their tone when they rejoice, and I know when they are sad, for even the gods feel sadness. I know when over fallen cities of the past and the curved white bones of heroes they sing the dirges of the gods' lament. But alas, the words I know not, and the wonderful strains of the melody of their speech beat on my soul and pass away unknown. Therefore I travel from the land of Hern, till I came to the house of the prophet Jrny, and told him that I sought to find the meaning of the gods. And Jrny told me to ask the shepherds concerning all the gods, for what the shepherds knew it was meet for a man to know, and beyond that knowledge turned into trouble. But I told Jrny that I had heard myself the voices of the gods, and knew that they were there beyond the twilight, and so could never more bow down to the gods that the shepherds made from the red clay which they scooped up with their hands out of the hillside. Then Jrny said to me, Nay, lest forget that thou hast heard the gods, and bow down again to the gods of the red clay that the shepherds make, and find thereby the ease that the shepherds find, and at last die, remembering devoutly the god of the red clay that the shepherds scooped with their hands out of the hill, for the gift of the gods that sit beyond the twilight and smile at the gods of clay are neither ease nor contentment. And I said, the gods that my mother made out of the red clay that she had got from the hill, fashioning it with many arms and eyes as she sang me songs of its power and told me stories of its mystic birth, this god is lost and broken, and ever in my ears is ringing the melody of the gods. And Jrny said, if thou wouldst seek knowledge, know that only those that come behind the gods may clearly know their meaning. And this thou canst only do by taking ship and putting out to sea from the land of Hern and sailing up the coast towards the forest. There the sea cliffs turn to the left or southward, and full upon them beats the twilight from over the sea, and there thou mayest come round behind the forest. Here where the world's edge mingles with the twilight, the gods come in the evening, and if thou canst come behind them, thou shalt hear their voices clear, beating full seaward, and filling all the twilight with sound of song, and thou shalt know the meaning of the gods. But where the cliffs turn southward, there sits behind the gods Brimdono, the oldest whirlpool in the sea, roaring to guard his masters. Him the gods have chained forever to the floor of the twilight sea to guard the door of the forest that lieth above the cliffs. Hear then, if thou canst hear the voices of the gods as thou hast said, thou wilt know their meaning clear, but this will profit thee little when Brimdono drags thee down and all thy ship. Thus spake Cynith to me. But I said, O Cynith, forget. But thus spake Cynith to me. But I said, O Cynith, forget those whirlpool-guarded gods beyond the forest, and if thy small gods be lost, thou shalt worship with me the small god that my mother made. Thousands of years ago he conquered cities, but is not any longer an angry god. Pray to him, Kithneb, and he shall bring thee comfort, and increase to thy flocks, and a mild spring, and at the last a quiet ending for thy days. But Kithneb heeded not, and only bade me find a fisher ship, and men to row it. So on the next day we put forth from the land of Hern in a boat that the fisher folk use. And with us came 4 of the fisher folk, who rowed the boat, while I held the rudder, but Kithneb sat and spake not in the prow. And we rowed westward up the coast till we came at evening, where the cliffs turned southward, and the twilight gleamed upon them, and the sea. There we turned southwards, and saw at once Brimdono, and as a man tears the purple cloak of a king slain in battle to divide it with other warriors, Brimdano toward the sea, and ever around him and around him, with a gnarled hand, Brimdano whirled the sail of some adventurous ship, the trophy of some calamity wrought in his greed for shipwreck long ago, where he sat to guard his masters from all who fare on the sea. And ever one far-reaching empty hand swung up and down, so that we durst not go nearer. Only Kithneb neither saw Brimdano nor heard his roar, and when we would go no further, bade us lower a small boat with oars out of the ship. Into this boat Kithneb descended, not heeding words from us, and onwards rowed alone. A cry of triumph over ships and men Brimdano uttered before him, but Kithneb's eyes were turned towards the forest as he came behind the gods. Upon his face the twilight beat full from the haunts of evening to illuminate the smiles that grew about his eyes as he came behind the gods, him that had found the gods above their twilit cliffs, him that had heard their voices close at last and knew their meaning clear, him from the cheerless world with its doubting and prophets that lie, from all hidden meanings where truth rang clear at last, Brimdano took. But when Parm ceased to speak, in the king's ears the roar of Brimdano exulting over ancient triumphs and the whelming of ships seemed still to ring.